Welcome back, guys, and today I'm going to be ranking every single guest from the Mortal Kombat series. This list, this, this list will be ranked from worst to best, and each character will be rated based upon how fun they are, how well they are portrayed in the games compared to their source material, and how unique their gameplay style is, and how well they fit into the Mortal Kombat series, and how exciting it is for them to be added. I'll also be taking into consideration my personal preferences of the characters themselves. Just to be clear, when I mean unique gameplay, a lot of these characters have specific ways that they fight in their respective franchises, and one reason that Mortal Kombat guests are so cool is that they will often create unique mechanics and gameplay styles around how they fight. So, if there's a specific mechanic that they made up for this character, then they will rank higher because of it rather than just being a stock average character. Also, this list will be a little bit biased because certain characters I do very much enjoy the characters themselves more than actually how they play. So that will be a little bit of a factor, but I tried my best to keep it pretty unbiased. I'm probably already going to get a little bit of heat for this one, but in last place we have Freddy Krueger from Mortal Kombat 9. This and Kratos were the first ever guest characters in the series, and you can tell. First off, its appearance is alright. This is an Xbox 360 slash PlayStation 3 game, so the graphics aren't going to be incredible, but its visual design is not the best. I'm sure this was due to licensing, but they took the 2009 reboot version of Freddy Krueger rather than the original Robert Englund version. Also, I wanted to say, now that we're getting into a horror character, that any information I have or knowledge I have of horror guest fighters in these games, most of it I get from one particular Let's Make a Fighting Game Out of Horror Characters video by Thorgy's Arcade. Great channel, go check him out. And from 3C Films, who is a major horror fan. I learn a lot from him when I watch his videos. So I have never actually seen any of these horror movies myself. So you can take what I say about the portrayal of them a little bit with a grain of salt if you wish to do so, because I have not seen them. As far as his voice goes, it's kind of odd. He is voiced by Robert Englund, which is a great thing, but he really doesn't have many lines. The pre-fight interactions between characters was not introduced until the following game, that being Mortal Kombat X. So the only sounds that Robert Englund makes for the character are a very few, and they are only when he is attacked or when he is doing an intro thing where he's just kind of doing a laughing thing that is always the same no matter who you're fighting, or when he shushes the opponent during his grab. They all sound good, but because he has no interactions with other characters, you can't feel the exciting personality that Freddy Krueger has come across in this game. This is one of the reasons why guest characters in fighting games are so much fun. Their personalities clash with not only with the other guests in the game, but also the original characters as well. So when you take someone who is usually a pretty talkative guy that has iconic lines, and you don't allow him to say them, it's kind of difficult to enjoy that character as much as you could otherwise. I don't blame the design of the character on his own, it's more of a problem of the game itself, but it does hinder his enjoyment in this game. As far as his moveset goes, it's decent. They gave him a second Razor Glove, which they do explain in the ending, which I'll get into in a minute, but they mostly only focus on that throughout the course of his gameplay. In my opinion, his gameplay is pretty underwhelming. Almost every special move in this game that he has is a projectile, and it only pertains to his glove. Just for context for the rest of this video, normal moves are your single or double button presses of X, Y, A, and B if you're on Xbox, and they are your simple punches and kicks or combo string type thing. Your special moves are your directional inputs and mostly pertain much more to the character themselves rather than just random things that most characters can do, if that makes any sense. For example, XYX is a normal attack string for Scorpion, whereas back forward X launches his spear. That's what I mean by normal versus special moves. Freddy Krueger's special moves are just okay. His moves include a glaive toss, a ground spike, a ground projectile, a glove stance, a sleeping potion projectile, and a fire teleport. The reason why I think that his moveset is underwhelming is that only 2 of those moves are anything other than random blade slashes or projectiles. The sleeping potion and the fire teleport are great, but considering that in the movies, Freddy Krueger is a dream demon, there's tons of other things that you could have done to make him so much more interesting in this game. But from what I can gather, he should be playing in this game similar to what Mysterio from Marvel would play like in a game. You should be second guessing every move that he does because you don't know if it's real or it's completely made up. So because of that, he just becomes a little bit underwhelming. Now on to his character ending. In every Mortal Kombat game, you do what's called a tower or challenge tower or whatever, and at the end of the tower, you are giving a boss battle against whoever the final boss of that game is. Then you basically get a non-canon short story about what the characters would do with ultimate power in this new world. Non-canon meaning it does not matter and is not essential to the context of the rest of the Mortal Kombat universe. This is especially true for the guest characters. It's just for fun. In Freddy Krueger's ending, it explains that he decided to fight Shao Kahn because he was threatening souls that he considered his own, that he uses for food. And after losing to him the first time, he dons the second glove that I mentioned earlier and gets pulled into the Mortal Kombat universe. After defeating Shao Kahn, Nightwolf, who is a Native American fighter and is also actually a pretty cool guy, sends him back to the dream dimension using a shamanic ritual. The ending is pretty much what you would expect, and the others will get much more wild as they go, but there's really nothing too insane here. It's about what you would expect, but it's good that they gave context as to why they give them 2 gloves. The reason that they did this in our world is that there is a weird stance mechanic in every Mortal Kombat game where tapping the left trigger will switch which direction the character is facing. It has absolutely no bearing on gameplay whatsoever, and I don't know why it's ever in here, other than just to use the left trigger, which even then they use as much as they can for random characters just to make it do something. So because of this, they gave him a second claw instead of making one hand not have one like it traditionally has. Personally, I think it's really cool that they did that. I feel like in a new game, they should be able to do some sort of mechanic where certain moves would only work on one side of the stance, whereas the other. This character is very much a shame. As far as hype for the character himself, he's pretty high up there. As of 2011, when this game came out and he was introduced into it, he was one of the most popular horror icons at the time, as he is now, of course. It just made sense for him to be one of the first characters in the game as far as guest characters go. Finally, I'll talk about his finishers. In Mortal Kombat 9, each character is given 2 fatalities and 1 babality. I'll get to the babality in a minute. Just for the sake of keeping things a little more family friendly and to keep YouTube off my back, I am just going to tell you what the fatalities are referencing for each character and not fully describe or show them. For Freddy Krueger, in his case, his fatalities reference things like the furnace and the bed scene with the explosion. For context, most of the other finishers in this game rarely introduce entire new models and things like that, so this was technically advanced for the time of 2011. I do wish that he had played with the opponent more and like a dream aspect type of way to mess with their head more. The babality is nothing special. If you don't know, a babality occurs when you defeat an opponent and use one of these moves on them. They turn into a baby and have a unique animation. This one I can fully show you, and it's pretty funny. All it shows is baby Freddy Krueger in a stroller as he slashes at the camera with his hat on that is way too big for his head. It's not amazing, but it's still pretty cute. All in all, I think that he was a good choice to be the first guest fighter in this game, and overall, A zoner archetype does fit him well, but if there was one guest I wish they could have done better or redo nowadays on better hardware and better voice acting, this would definitely be the one. Next, we have RoboCop. This is a very odd character to talk about, but we'll get into it. First, we'll start out with his appearance. With Mortal Kombat 11, there is a lot of emphasis put on style and swag for the visuals. You can very easily see this in RoboCop and the guest characters overall. RoboCop fittingly looks extremely shiny and has very good lighting on him. He also has several cool costumes such as the normal Officer Murphy look, the damaged look, the police body armor look, and probably the coolest, the Cyber Ninja look. These refer to all the Cyber Ninjas throughout the Mortal Kombat series such as Sector, Cyrax, Smoke, Cyber Sub-Zero, and all of them. This is especially cool because in this game, none of the Cyber Ninjas are in it. It's worth noting that Sector and Cyrax were going to be added as DLC if COVID did not screw up the plans for more DLC in that game. When discussing Mortal Kombat 11 guests, I also have to talk about their intros and victory screens. Each one is given 4 intro screens and 4 victory animations, other than their standard finishing moves. For RoboCop, they're all pretty cool. His intros include him stepping out of the police car, activating the large mech that he pilots, telling other officers to stand down,
10-10, need backup now.
and doing a simple pistol flip in his hand. For his victory animations, he does another pistol flip as he pulls out the gun of his holster that's inside his leg,
You are under arrest, dirtbag.
he talks to the local news,
Robo, any comment?
Crime does not pay.
interrogates the opponent, and arrests them on a police car.
You are coming with me.
These are all fitting for his character, but none are particularly incredible or funny, aside from maybe the victory animation where he apprehends the suspect. Getting onto his moveset, we figure out where most of the problems lie. When you think of RoboCop, what do you think of? That's right, you think of a large, slow gunslinger. And congratulations, that is exactly what you get with him in this game. Now, just because this is how he plays does not mean it's necessarily bad. You can absolutely make an interesting fighter out of him. However, in my opinion, they failed at this miserably. Almost every move he has in this game has to do with some kind of long-range weapon. He uses everything from pistols to rifles to bombs to tire poppers. The 2 moves that he has that does not pertain to a long-range weapon or something of the sort is a command grab that sends the opponent full screen. RoboCop in this game is the ultimate keep-away character. Not only is that extremely boring moveset in my opinion for a character, but this is a game that has been heavily criticized for being an extremely keep-away projectile-heavy game. And you know that is saying something when every single game in this franchise has some level of criticism pertaining to its projectiles. While it's definitely true that this playstyle fits very well for RoboCop, it doesn't mean that it's an interesting moveset. This is one instance where your personal bias towards how you play fighting games can definitely affect where you place this character. If you love zoners and keeping the opponents far away from you, you'll very much enjoy this character. And there's nothing wrong with that. The last thing I want to do in this ranking is tell you how to enjoy video games. But it's very clear what this character is meant to be, and in my opinion, he neither does it in an interesting way, nor does that gameplay style have much unique about it. In my opinion, I should have given him several armored attacks that replicate the feeling of how tanky he is. In the movies, at least from what I've seen. He's a character who can take a lot of damage and just keep on fighting. Now we'll talk about his finishers. Both fatalities reference really cool things from his movies, that being the large mechs that he pilots and his targeting system. Both of these are really cool, but the one with the mech kind of lets me down because we already saw the mech in the Fatal Blow, so it doesn't really feel special to see it again here. Finally, we have his friendship. These are mainly just meant to be funny and have a good time. Friendships were added in Mortal Kombat 2 and brought back in this game as a sort of apology type thing for the concerned parents about the violence in these games. Each character is given one, and they're much more meant to be fun, lighthearted jokes playing up the unique strengths of the characters. For RoboCop, he dances like a robot to a bunch of music clips with a chain around his neck that bears the logo of the company that made him from his movies.
RoboCop wins. Flawless victory.
And just for good measure, he also does the moonwalk. This is a great friendship in my opinion. It's not only super funny, but he also does the robot. Again, I'm glad that he got to do the robot in place of other cyber ninjas and other robots in the Mortal Kombat universe, as none of them are here. On top of this, when friendships were added in Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, strangely, none of the cyborgs did the robot either. Now for his ending. He gives himself an upgrade to his robot suit, then teams up with the special forces of the Mortal Kombat universe, which includes characters like Jax and Sonya Blade, to storm the company that made him and tear it down from within because they are corrupt. Although, as I will say again later, the costume that they give him in this ending is super cool and way better than anything else in the game, but you can't use it. It's so annoying. Many characters, not just the guests, have really cool costumes in their endings, but they won't ever let you use them. Finally, we have to talk about the hype of this character, or I guess the lack thereof. This is generally agreed upon to be the least fitting character in the series. Not only because RoboCop is not really a bad guy and does have no tendency to be really nasty stuff to bad guys, but also because he really does not have any significance in the modern day. There's been talks of a RoboCop TV show being produced, but this is fairly recent, and this was released in the game in 2019. So obviously, those rumors did not exist back then. So at this point, the most recent RoboCop thing was the reboot, which I've heard is not the best. Make no mistake, people love RoboCop on his own, but I do not think that this is a character that most people were clamoring for. You have to also take into consideration the fact that at the time, we were still waiting for a particular character who had been leaked for months, and they were still waiting to see if he would ever get in the game. We'll talk about this character next, but still, clearly RoboCop was not the most fascinating character. He is helped by the inclusion of the T-800 Terminator and Rambo also being in the game. It created not only a cool fight scenario between the three of them, also an entire 80s action hero aesthetic going on. This is one of those characters I think the developers did their best they could with him, but really just should not have been a thing at all, really, in my opinion. The only reason he was chosen was because Terminator was already in the game, and they wanted someone for him to fight that would make an interesting matchup for him, in my opinion. And because he was pretty easy to get the licensing for. At 15, we have the Joker from DC Comics. This one's pretty frustrating because on the surface, the Joker seems like a complete, competently built and designed character. However, when you take a closer look, you realize that this character was a mistake. To really understand why this character was not accepted very well, you need to know the context of the game at the time. Everyone was waiting anxiously for the eventual reveal of Ash Williams from the Evil Dead series into the game. He had been teased countless times by the creators, the actor Bruce Campbell, and data miners as well. However, when the eventual trailer for the Combat Pack came out, it featured the Joker instead of Ash. This is a rare instance where some people would say, oh, you don't really know he was going to be in the game. They could have changed their minds at the last minute. Well, there are still images that you can find today where it shows on websites that people at the time went to pre-order this pack, and it showed Ash William trademarked in the list of characters. You can also tell by looking at the Joker's model in the trailer. It looks nothing like the final model that is in the game, aside from the color scheme, of course. It looks extremely rushed and ugly, and not Joker ugly, like 3D model ugly. So with the context, you can see that this character was never chosen because they were excited and had great ideas that they wanted to use to make a cool moveset. They purely did it out of desperation to get something out to the public. Because of this, in my opinion, most of his moves and costumes and so on did not have nearly enough love and attention given to it. There's an overarching problem with this character himself in the game I'll get onto later, but let's start with his appearance. His base outfit in the game is pretty good. You have the usual purple suit with the green undercoat. Nothing too crazy here, just pretty standard stuff. They do give him a cane which you can customize, and we'll talk about that later. His second outfit changes up the suit slightly around the collar and gives him a scarf. Nothing too interesting, but it is something. His next one gives him tons of straps around his arms and chest, as well as an 8-ball on his left eye for some reason. In my opinion, this is the coolest looking one other than the normal one. Then we have the one that makes him look like a ringleader at a circus and gives him feathers on his back. It's definitely the oddest take of the character in my opinion. Overall, not the best. His base outfit I honestly have no notes on, it looks totally fine. The problem is that the Joker has so many iconic outfits through comics, TV shows, and especially movies, they decided to use absolutely none of them. I know someone out there is going to say, oh, you have to go by the licensing for each of these and blah, 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 blah. And while I'm not an expert in that area, I'm pretty sure they still own the rights to them. Mortal Kombat is owned by Warner Brothers, who owns DC as well. So this is a completely free character for them to use. So there may be some licensing with a few movies here and there, but at the absolute very least, they could have used the Hawaiian shirt from the Killing Joke comics that they do own. And just to mention it, the 2019 Joker movie starring Joaquin Phoenix was not out yet, so they would not have been able to use the costume from that. They also gave Noob Saibot a Batman Who Laughs skin, who is a type of Joker variant from the multiverse. Don't ask, it's a long story. They should have given that costume to him, even though it would have been a little bit janky with this gameplay. So after all this, you can't tell me that they weren't able to use any other costumes than these generic ones. After this, we get onto his intros, and they are a little bit better. His first one is okay. All he does is a little dance as he swings around his cane and walks onto the stage. His second one uses his finger to paint an iconic smile on his face. Then he uses his cars to reference his Injustice 2 outro screen. Then he jump scares the cameraman. These are all pretty decent. His outros are definitely a lot better though. The first one, he pulls out the gun several times trying to shoot at you, but all comes out is his iconic bang flag. Another, he uses green spray paint to paint a big ha on the camera. Then another, he just laughs a couple times and bows at the camera. But easily, the best one is where he traps the opponent in dynamite and fiddles with the detonator for a couple of seconds before he gets surprised when it actually blows up. This is obviously a reference to The Dark Knight, one of the very few that we will see. His moveset is probably the best thing about him, although I still think it could have been better. For starters, they did actually give him a club that allows him to be much more distinct from his Injustice counterpart. His special moves uses things like a gun hidden inside of a Batman dummy, his iconic punching gloves, and of course several Jack-in-the-Boxes. These are all very Joker-y moves, and it fits the character well. However, again, there are very little references in any of his normal and special moves to references other movies or TV shows. The one that I could find was his special move Getting Lit, where he lights a trail of gasoline on fire, as well as his forward X move, where he throws some money that is on fire. And both of these are, again, references to The Dark Knight. The Joker has so many iconic weapons and fights in movies and comics that they just refuse to use in this moveset. There's plenty of things like the acid flowers, the knife toe, and the funny dance that he does as he takes out the mayor in the first Batman movie. I will circle back around to this fact in a minute, but first I want to go over his fatalities and finishers. His fatalities include very famous weapons that the Joker usually uses, such as his punching glove, an exploding cape, and a Tommy gun. None of them are too crazy, but they fit the character well. I think they are the best parts about him, but again, I wish they would have referenced something like the funny way he dances and takes out the mayor in the first Batman movie, but overall, they are solid. His friendship is the only appearance of Batman that we get in this game with his batarang. The Joker is about to finish off the opponent before a batarang hits him from off screen as he says, "Come on, bats," and pulls out some balloons and stands there and looks at the camera.
Hey! Come on, Bat!
Friendship. The Joker wins. Flawless victory.
This is one where it shows off just how crazy he is that even when he's supposed to be nice, he still isn't. Next, I wanted to talk about the ending, and this one's pretty fun. He teams up with Havoc, who is a zombie character that loves chaos, and basically just goes on a rampage throughout the realms. This is extremely on brand for the character, and the inclusion of his teammate Havoc is genius. Havoc at the time was a character that we had not seen since 2008 in a game called Armageddon, and in that game, basically everyone returned, so it was not even that surprising. This was also before his grand return in Mortal Kombat 1, the most recent game where he was seen as a surprise. The only other thing to mention about his ending is that he gets a really cool suit based off the Hourglass, which is the time-traveling ultimate weapon that every character is trying to get in the game. And again, I wish the guest characters could use these costumes because it looks way better than anything else they designed. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but Shang Tsung and Liu Kang get them, and they are the best versions of them in this game. I wanted to circle back around to what I was saying before about his moves that references other movies. I'm not the type of guy to complain a lot when characters don't reference other things every couple of seconds, but it does annoy me when every other character does, and he is the outlier. The entire point of these characters in Mortal Kombat, aside from just being a fun character, is to reference and celebrate their source material. And to make money, of course, but, that's not why we're here. So when you have a character who barely does that at all, it's annoying. On top of this, the Joker that they chose for this game is a generic one and not one from any movie or video game or whatever. He's technically the same one from Mortal Kombat vs. DC, as you can see in several beginning interactions, but still, the Joker was stock normal Joker. There's nothing wrong with that on paper, but when you realize that every other guest character in this franchise has basically been plucked from their own universe with memories from their movies and TV shows or whatever it may be, creating an entirely original character, for the most part, is not very fun. You easily could have taken almost any one of the other various Jokers and put him in this game, and it would have been the best version of him. It would be far more exciting than a stock variation. Even Multiverses, a game that is garbage nowadays in every aspect other than the gameplay. They pulled the animated series version for their game and had him be played by Mark Hamill. The voice actor in this game for the Joker is the same guy who did it in Mortal Kombat vs. DC, and also voices Raiden in both of those games. He does a great job with no issues here. But when even a failing platform fighter got this right, it once again seems like they do not have enough time to do this right. They just got lucky that the same guy who voiced him before was still working for them. I can understand why they didn't feel the need to do this. Plenty of other games, such as the Batman Arkham series, do this. But the reason that they do that in those games is that they're telling an original story. The Joker, and subsequently all other guest characters, have zero bearing on the story. They're giving nothing to do, and are almost always an amalgamation of their previous stories and memories. I can understand that for someone like Deathstroke or someone like that, someone who is not really super known by the public to have really enriching stories, making a stock version of him is okay. He doesn't have countless interpretations that are all beloved by Joker's fans. In fact, I would say his most famous interpretation was where he's on screen for more than 1 minute with Teen Titans Go. So while you could pull him from that universe, people don't know that well enough to care whether you take that version or just create entirely new Deathstroke. It would be better if they took that universe, but people would not be upset. So when Joker is set in his original character, when well-known and beloved versions of him, such as the Heath Ledger, Joker, Jack Nicholson versions, could both be pulled from their universes into this game with a few references to the others, it would go over much better than it would appear. All in all, the Joker was a rushed, lazy, and frustrating character in this game. I totally believe, given enough time and money, the Joker could have easily been one of the most beloved guests in this franchise. But as it is, he's definitely been forgotten for the most part. Next we have Conan the Barbarian. He's a very odd character in this game. There are many reasons for that, but first we'll go over the main points of his overall design of the character. First we have his design and visual. He looks pretty good in this game. His visual likeness matches that of Arnold much better in this game, not only because of better hardware, but also because it's not covered up by a bunch of robotic parts like the Terminator is. It's also interesting because he is the tallest character in the game. It doesn't have much effect on gameplay, but I thought it was cool to mention. His costumes are okay. They're weird because all but one of them only changed his clothing and doesn't actually change his body. There's nothing wrong with that, but in gameplay, you rarely see any difference between gray pants and red pants. His final two skins do actually change him a decent amount. It trades his shorts and boots into larger pants and covers him up in body paint. It's a cool design, but it doesn't really add too much to the character. As far as the voice goes, I think Chris Cox, the voice actor, did a much better impersonation of Arnold in this game than he did in Mortal Kombat 11 for Terminator. We'll get on to that debacle more later, but for now, all you need to know is that Arnold did not voice any of his characters in Mortal Kombat, unfortunately. However, as I said, the voice acting in this game is still pretty good. He has all of the mannerisms down perfectly. As for his gameplay, it's about what you expect. He has tons of sword slashes and big heavy moves. His moves involve a sword spin, a vertical slash that can catch everyone opponent, attack where he chases down the opponent full screen, and things like that. As far as the uniqueness standpoint goes, he has 4 moves that have armor on them in his special moves. This is very unique to the character because not many fighters have multiple armored moves, let alone one. He also has 3 grabs that are attached to the end of 3 combo strings. Aside from that, he also has the most health in the game when you pair him up with certain cameo fighters. His gameplay is a lot of up-close and personal, hard-hitting attacks. I'll get into this more later, but he's heavily inspired by the character named Tusk from Killer Instinct. Now we can move on to his fatalities and animality. His fatalities include him attacking the opponent several times with his big sword, and the other one putting them in a boiling cauldron. And his animality shows him turning into a bull. which is actually kind of cool because he uses his sword in the animality as well. Overall, his fatals are pretty cool but simple. That, however, makes sense for what it is otherwise a simple character. Now, I wanted to briefly touch on the ending, as it shows him defeating Shao Kahn and spending out the rest of his life in the Mortal Kombat universe, battling its various monsters, before eventually settling down to becoming king of his people back in his own universe. Similar to the Chronica skins in Mortal Kombat 11, I wish they gave us a King Conan skin that they showed us at the end of the character tower. It looks pretty cool and would be something I would definitely use in the game. Now we have to talk about his hype level and then conclude with how low he is on the tier list. Out of every guest character that Mortal Kombat has chosen, I feel like he is easily the least liked purely from a hype standpoint. He's a character who's not very relevant for a long time. Most people playing this game nowadays remember him as an old movie that they watched with their dad, and everyone was easily predicting him to be very boring gameplay wise. On a positive note, the gameplay did end up being more fun than people would initially think. I feel like he mostly comes down to the fact that general gameplay of Mortal Kombat 1 is extremely fun, and it's hard to make a bad character in that game. Really, I feel like the reason that he was chosen was for two reasons. One, they already made a deal with some publisher or whatever to use Arnold's character and likeness in multiple games, and since they didn't want to use a T-800 again, this was really their only other option, aside from maybe the dude from Commando or Dutch from Predator. So, they just had to go with it. And second, they really wanted to put the character from Tusk, from Killer Instinct, in here. He was in fact built upon Conan the Barbarian back when he was created in the late 90s. Really, his gameplay style of a big dude with a sword really could have just fit a character that was already in the last couple of Mortal Kombat games, that being Kotal Khan. He uses a giant helicopter sword similar to Thanos in most appearances that he is in the Mortal Kombat franchise, but has far more interesting moves than Conan. He uses his Aztec sun god aesthetic to make tons of totems and really cool moves like that, which make him so much more interesting than just a big dude with a sword that Conan is. I really would have just rather them added Kotal Khan into this game rather than Conan. You know that they messed up when you created a character that is better than the one you put in the game in every way. In fact, leading up to the announcement that Conan was going to be in the game, data miners who went into the files and saw the names of moves and things like that could never really nail down whether Kotal Khan or Conan was the actual character they were going to use. This just shows how similar the characters are and how much they were handicapped by having to use another guest character in this spot. He also doesn't feel like he fits the Mortal Kombat universe that well. Sure, he's brutal in his movies, but he's easily the weakest character they put in this or any other Mortal Kombat game, aside from maybe Ghostface. But even then, as we'll see later, Ghostface still has a more interesting moveset potential than Conan and is much more brutal. It was clear in the development room that they had to stretch to make this character anything more than a big dude with a sword. Also, on another note, I said before that his voice acting is good by Chris Cox, and that is true. However, he has probably the weakest dialogue exchanges between characters that have voices. Most of the dialogue exchanges between characters who use technology and things like that boil down to him just not understanding modern technology, and that's the whole joke. His personality doesn't really serve well to interesting interactions. I'm not saying that every character needs to be extremely jokey and funny like the MCU or something, but after listening to most of their lines, there really isn't one that sticks out to me aside from the ones that are in the trailers, because I watched them many times over. I think the team did the best with what they were given for this character, but it's clear to see at this point that they need to be a little more careful with who they choose as guest characters, because if they're not careful, they're going to continue to pick characters who are not suited for fighting games, or at least ones that are this in-depth. Next up, we have Kratos from the God of War series. He appeared in Mortal Kombat 11 for the PlayStation 3. Starting with his appearance, he looked like he was pulled straight out of the first 3 games that appeared on the PlayStation 3, and he looked great. His model looks very good, although I will say he's kind of weird looking sometimes in the game. He's kind of hunched over, and professional players have pointed out that projectiles sometimes just go straight over his head, for the only reason being that he's hunched over. It's just odd because he's usually probably one of the tallest characters that would be in the game if it weren't for this. It's not a problem per se, it's just weird. His unlockable costume is also cool, being a dark version of himself, but also appeared in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. His voice in the game is also very good, but that's only because they just ripped the voice line straight from the game. Like I said with Freddy Krueger, he has 3 lines total between the same interactions that he does every time he starts the match, and a few other things here and there. So we don't get his full personality that comes across in the game. His moves are very cool. He has many special moves that reflect how he plays in the God of War games by using mythical weapons such as Blades of Chaos, the Golden Fleece, a fire bow, and his sword. I also love the special move that includes quick time events. If you don't know what those are, it simply means that time slows down for a second for you to be able to press a certain button that appears on screen to make things happen. It's used a lot in adventure games and hack and slash games like God of War, so it's a cool reflection of gameplay mechanics that came from that game and was able to be implemented here. But one thing I will say is that his basic movement, like his attack strings, are very slow. It's not that big a deal, but it was noticeable. Now moving on to his fatalities and finishers. One fatality shows him using his giant sword to slice the opponent in half, while his other uses the head of Medusa and the Nemine Cestus, which is gauntlets that he puts on his hands for bigger punches, to attack the opponent after they have been frozen by Medusa. Both of these are really cool and great uses of his moves and Greek mythology overall. His babality is also very fun. After turning into a baby, he rips off the head of a stuffed animal that resembles what I believe to be a kraken or a leviathan type thing. It's very funny and very cute. As for his ending, it shows him appearing in the Mortal Kombat universe to find that Shao Kahn has taken over the realm. He then fights him and wins the tournament. He then prepares to fight Raiden and Fujin, thinking they are enemies that are also considered gods in this universe. However, they show him respect and praise his heroism for defeating Shao Kahn. Kratos is taken aback by this reaction, as in his world, all of the gods are villains. Kratos then returns to his own world after freeing Earthrealm and continuing his conquest, now having a different outlook on whether or not all gods are good or evil. It's actually one of the few guest character endings that actually makes the character think about their choices as somewhat of a character arc. Most of the others are just them goofing off and doing random stuff. And while those are cool, it doesn't take much advantage of the world of that the Mortal Kombat universe is in. Also, it's cool to see Fujin in the ending because aside from this, he's not in the game. There were rumors for a long time that he was in the files as a playable character, at least at some point, but he was eventually scrapped. Now we have to talk about the hype level of this character overall. And for starters, his introduction, or rather his reveal trailer, is one of the coolest that the Mortal Kombat team have ever created. They made an entire cinematic trailer revealing him yanking Sub-Zero off the stage and starting a fight with Scorpion, so a blast of fire covers the screen as it pans to the Mortal Kombat logo. Most other guest characters either jump into the frame or walk out from shadows of a dark room. So to have a trailer that perfectly encapsulates the character and reveals that it will be in the game in a way that suits him is really cool. However, that hype would not last very long as we had hoped, because it was later revealed that he would be a PlayStation exclusive character. Because of that, it was not only a bummer that you could only buy him on a PlayStation, but that it also meant he could be banned from all competitive tournaments, because anyone who played on Xbox would not be able to use him or play against him for practice. This is a shame, as it not only makes the character not as well known as he could have been, but it also means that we don't really know how good or bad he is competitively. Because they couldn't play them at tournaments, most people never used him, and in fact, because of that, there are not even many combo videos or explanations of how to play the character on YouTube or things like that. He's mostly seen as a novelty nowadays because people just didn't give him the time of day when he was out. Between the fact that he was console exclusive and the fact that there's still no character interactions, meaning that his real personality didn't come across, I think I have to leave him here. Again, I would love to see him come back in a new game with much more personality and voice lines that modern day games can give him, especially because of how much Kratos has changed with the reboot, now having a son, being much more bulky and stoic, and having way more weapons like an axe. Next, we have the T-800 Terminator. Personally, this is one of my favorite characters purely based on the character himself. I think the Terminator is super cool, and having him in a fighting game is very welcome. So you know it hurts me to put him this low on the list. First, we'll start with his visual aesthetic. Overall, he looks pretty good. The face model is a spitting image of old Arnold, and he looks just like a robot as he should. One thing I will say, however, is that they had to go with the Dark Fate design for this character, so his base look gives him the gray beard, which I'm not a big fan of. His other costumes are a little bit better. He has one that removes the beard and makes him look a little bit younger, which is appreciated, but doesn't save the design. He has another where his left hand from the elbow down is exposed with robotic parts on the left hand, and it is pretty cool, but it actually looks a little bit weird during gameplay because it's easy for it to blend into the background and it's hard to see where your attack is. His final one removes the jacket and either gives him a average Terminator shirt, a Johnny Cage gym shirt, or simply one with the Mortal Kombat 11 logo on it. These are fine, but I wish it would give him an average black shirt because the other colors clash with the rest of his design a lot. Overall, for his design, he looks fine, but it would have greatly helped if they gave him a Terminator 2 design. This is easily the most iconic look with all the black hair and grenades strapped to his body. I understand this is a licensing issue and that it was out of their control, but I do not think that the Dark Fate design was a good substitute. Even Fortnite got this better, which is weird considering that Warner Brothers is a much bigger company. As far as his voice goes, I think it's okay. I don't envy the task of portraying this character whose entire shtick is that he talks like a robot with a weird accent. So for anyone who had to do this, I'll give them props. This was once again done by Chris Cox, and it sounds alright. I think if you talk to most people, they would not be able to tell the difference between the voices in most cases, but it is a little distracting for those who actually know the story. As far as his intros and outros go, they're probably the best for the Mortal Kombat 11 characters, but that could just be my bias talking. His first intro shows him appearing from the time bubble, fully clothed thankfully. The next shows him flipping out his shotgun from an action figure case instead of a box of roses that he had in the movie. Third shows him jumping off his motorcycle. And the final shows him walking over a burning picture of Sarah Connor. All these are cool and portray the character well. The outros, in my opinion, are even better. The first recreates the first shot of T2 as the endoskeleton crushes a skull. The second shows him driving away on his motorcycle onto a highway. The third is my personal favorite as he walks away as his skin burns off and shows the endoskeleton beneath. And the final one shows him assessing the opponent on the ground and his robotic sensors telling him that they are in fact terminated. Once again, these are all brilliant and reflect the movies very well. However, now we move on to the gameplay, and it's very interesting in this game. For most people, this is where the design kind of falls off. But let's start with what he does have, that being a simple shotgun blast, two command grabs, a move where he runs out of the opponent and is also named the Running Man, which is a reference to one of Arnold's old movies. And a teleport that uses the time bubble. He has a few other moves, but it's mostly this toolkit that you'll use the most. All in all, he's a mix-up grappler. A mix-up in a fighting game basically means that they have a lot of different high, low, mid, and overhead attacks. When a character is blocking, you can either hit them high, mid, overhead, or low. However, there are two problems with his design. The first is that he doesn't feel a lot like the Terminator. Aside from his mostly robotic normal attacks, he doesn't have a lot of references to the source material in his moves. He has the shotgun, teleport, the chest grenade from his batteries, and that's about it. I will also mention that he has a resurrection move where he can come back to life as only the endoskeleton. But it's really not helpful. It takes up 2 of your 3 move slots and can only be used on the 3rd round. So if you lose the first 2 rounds, you cannot use it. You can only win if you win one, lose another, and then lose the 3rd. Even then, it's stupidly unhelpful because all you can do is a few normal attacks. You can't jump and you can't use special moves, so it is really not helpful at all. I genuinely think Devora, who has a similar move, is much more helpful because in that she can at least shoot projectiles and fly. Aside from those, the Terminator doesn't really use any of his famous weapons or vehicles from the movie. He doesn't use his motorcycle in gameplay. There's no mention of other characters that could have been used to summon, nor is there any use of any of the Skynet network technology. Aside from a few minor acknowledgements, for all intents and purposes, Terminator is basically just a guy with a shotgun in the game. It also doesn't help that his most defining features were all just used for Jason Voorhees in the last game. Now I'll talk about his fatalities and friendship. His fatalities include him using things like his motorcycle, teleportation device, and his shotgun. In my opinion, the second one, where he sends the opponent to the future and gets blown up by other T-800s standing around, is one of the best guest character fatalities they've ever made. They're both very good uses of his movies. I do wish, however, they would have used something where they teleported them to Judgment Day to get nuked along with the entirety of the rest of the world. His friendship is also fun as he does several tricks on his motorcycle as it drives back and forth across the screen. Again, very simple, but it is cool.
Friendship. The Terminator wins. Flawless victory.
His ending is also very interesting. It shows him spending thousands of years trying to use the hourglass to reshape time to where the robots win the war, before eventually giving up and creating a world where humans and robots coexist. After this, he throws himself into the ocean where his body can no longer be found so that no one would find out the location of the hourglass. It's a very heroic send-off for the character and seems very much like something the Terminator would do. The one thing I will say that is kind of weird about this ending is that Cassie Cage narrates the whole thing, which is weird. She has no bearing on the ending, nor does she ever talk to him outside of their own fight dialogue. My best guess as to why she was chosen is that she looks the most like Sarah Connor, with a military lady with blonde hair, but they also just done the same thing to Sonya, so it still doesn't make much sense to me. If I had to take a even more real world guess, I would just say that the voice actress was just in the building that day, so they just got the first person to do it. People really enjoyed that he was in the game, but not only was his reception molded by the fact that Arnold would not bring his voice with him, but this was also during the whole Ash Williams debacle. So most people were much more concerned with whether or not he would be in the game, rather than being excited for the characters that have been released. Looking back on it now, we can very much enjoy the character that he is. I think because it's not voiced by Arnold and the gameplay, while fun, does not represent the Terminator character nor the franchise extremely well, I will leave him here. You can rank him lower if you wish, because I'll admit I am biased toward the character, not only because I like him, but also the way he plays. I enjoy mix-up grapplers in fighting games, so anytime that I can play one of those characters, it's always more fun to me than probably objectively it should be. Next up is Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. This is the first character that I'm going to talk about from Mortal Kombat X. And the reason I say that is because this game introduced a really cool mechanic that fleshed out not only the Mortal Kombat characters, but also the guest characters. That mechanic is the variation system. Each character is given 3 variations, which can change not only their moveset, but also their appearance. So I'll be going into depth about each of these variations for the characters to tell the difference between them. First, we'll talk about Leatherface's appearance in this game. Honestly, he looks spot on. The face, the clothes, and especially the chainsaw all look top notch. I also love how well they got the mannerisms of the character down. He acts just like a wild and crazy as the character should, and his victory animation even pays tribute to the end of the first movie. The variations change his costume, so I'll go over those as well. The first variation shows him as his normal look from the plaid undershirt and apron, and it looks great. The second, named Butcher, replaces him to appear closer to how he's portrayed in the 2000s remake. The third variation, named Pretty Lady, shows his appearance at the end of the first movie. Now on to his moveset. He fights exactly how you think he would in this game, that being a heavy rushdown character with plenty of chainsaw moves. Each character has a couple of special moves that is usable in every variation. For him, those include the Psycho Slasher, which is a simple slash of the chainsaw, the Spinning Saw, which is a spinning move that lurching towards the opponent and can be amplified to hit them in the air, the High Saw, which is a simple anti-air, and Ground Sparks, which can be a restand. As for the variation moves, starting with Killer, it adds a stance mechanic. This one gives him multiple enders that launch him into the air and can be used to end combos. It's a very fun variation to play around with, and it's usually considered the best competitively. The second is the Butcher variation. It's the most interesting one because it not only changes special moves, but also his normal attack. It gives him moves that can be seen in the reboot, referencing his mallet. As I said before, he used them for multiple normal moves as well as several special moves accompanied with that, like the command throw, the mallet strike, which can be amplified to pop them into the air, and several other chainsaw moves to replace the stance mechanic from the last variation. The last one is Pretty Lady, and this one's easily the least interesting one. All it does is give him the ability to throw the chainsaw either straight, high, or low. Nothing too special, but in a game with a lot of projectiles, as every Mortal Kombat game has, it's a good variation to have. His fatalities are also about what you'd expect. One simply shoves the chainsaw into the stomach of the opponent to then cut them in half vertically, while the other one does something a little more unique by grabbing a meat hook that he used from his barn from the movies to raise the opponent into the air before slicing them in half horizontally. Neither of these are too amazing, but it's pretty much what you expect for the character. As for the ending, it's nothing too amazing. All it tells us that he basically falls in love with Cassie Cage after seeing her one time and chases her down across the realm before ultimately taking her out after she refuses to be with him. It's very on brand for his character, as teenage girls are the most characters that he chases down in his movies, as is the same for most horror characters. So nothing crazy here. Although it is funny to me that no one in the special forces or the rest of the world could beat him before he got to Cassie Cage. It's hilarious that in a world of wizards and ninjas, the normal guy with a chainsaw was able to beat almost all of them. Although obviously this is a non-canon ending, and in reality, or at least, the video game world, it's likely that he would not get that far. Overall, I really like Leatherface in this game. He's very fun and takes the idea of a big strong guy with a chainsaw in an otherwise crazy world and turns that into a moveset perfectly. I think the character could have easily been turned out into a very boring character with lots of moves that can be similar, and he could have easily run into the problem that Conan faces where everything feels the same. I think between the variation mechanic of the game and the fact that there's a lot more really cool moves that you can do with a chainsaw than you can a basic bronze sword, makes it a lot easier to create a really cool moveset. I'm also glad that he made it into this game, because he was originally going to be replaced by Michael Myers. And while that would have been great to not only have seen him in the franchise also be played up against Jason Voorhees, who is also in this game, I'm glad we got Leatherface instead. The much more heavy rushdown speed of this game does not really fit Michael Myers very well in my opinion, whereas it fits Leatherface perfectly. Also, as for as popular as Leatherface is, I feel like if he didn't make it into this game, it may have been very hard for him to get into another game after this. If I had to give some negatives, I would say that while his moveset is better fleshed out as a one-note character being a guy with a chainsaw than Conan is, his moveset is still exactly what you think. I don't think that there is much more you could do with him, because he's a very basic character. That really just goes to show the limitations of the character himself, and not the way he was portrayed in the game. Also, just for how many movies that have been in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, I wish that they would have included more costumes. This is obviously a problem for most guest characters in the franchise. I feel like for just how many versions of the character exist, would have been nice for them to include some different ones. Next up, we have the Xenomorph, or Alien, I guess. The game itself calls it Alien for some reason, which is fine, but I think it would have been better if they called it Xenomorph. In my opinion, I think the team nailed this visually. All of the mannerisms and movements of the Xenomorph are portrayed perfectly in the game. I've heard people complain that they don't like the Xenomorph stands up pretty much straight, like a normal person, when they're usually crawling around on the ground a lot more. And what I would say is that I think it's a necessary evil to make them playable in this game. They also include a special move that more resembles how they move. So they were making it clear that they're aware that this is how they move normally. They just had to do this so that he would fit normally into a game. His variations don't really change much of anything visually. All that changes is that the head goes from a smooth look to a crown-looking state and then a rigid look. Nothing too crazy changes on that front. As for his moveset, it's very awesome. His standard moves across all variations include things like a ground crawl, like I mentioned, a flip that can knock the opponents in the air when amplified, and a tail snag that acts similar to a sweep. He also has a move that's called the Xeno Strike, where he pounces on the opponent. His first variation, named Acidic, gives him various moves that make use of his acidic blood. It doesn't make for a ton of awesome, crazy combos, but I think it's a great reference to how their blood is acidic. I like how they use this as part of their history here, more than making every hit you do against the alien deal damage to you as well. Like it probably should have worked, but that's alright. It would have been way too broken if he had done that. This is probably the most popular version of the character as faithfulness goes. The second variation, named Conjurer, makes use of the rest of the alien hive. It gives you the ability to call eggs onto the field, which can act similar to an ice move that can freeze the opponent. You also have the ability of a drone slam. It allows you to call in clones or just other members of the colony to drop them onto the opponent. I think this variation perfectly uses how the aliens usually fight, which is in packs. The final variation is the coolest. This version is Tarkatan. One of the coolest things about the aliens is that they're very similar to symbiotes from Marvel in that when they get a host, they get some of their attributes to go along with them and whatever powers they may possess. So, the way that they explain the aliens existing in the Mortal Kombat universe in this game is that an alien became a host on top of a Tarkatan. Tarkatans, if you don't know, are the race of monsters with blades coming out of their hands and teeth that Baraka is from. This is a perfect way to adapt the aliens' history into a moveset, as it not only creates some really cool moves and setups that you can make in the game, but also brings a sort of Baraka-type playstyle into the game. Baraka is not present in this game otherwise, so it's nice to see him. In this playstyle, he gets the Tarkatan Rush, which is just a single slash towards the opponent. The Chop Chop, which is just like Baraka's normal Chop Chop move. And the Blade Spin, which sees the Xenomorph spinning around and doing 3 attacks. 2 with his blade and a 3rd with his tail. As for the moveset overall, I think that they perfectly adapted how these Xenomorphs would fight in the game. Something I love is that the Xenomorph has no kicks in this game. Instead, he only uses his tail for all of his kick moves. He has 2 fatalities in the game. The first, named Killer Queen, shows the opponent being impaled from the back from the tail of the Queen Xenomorph, or it splits the opponent in half. The second, named Deadly Hybrid, shows him grabbing the opponent with the Tarkatan blade and punching a hole through their mouth with the extended jaw tongue thing that they have out of their own mouth. Both of these are very cool references to the source material and perfectly encapsulate 2 iconic things about the series that could have been very hard to implement into gameplay. His win animation also shows him taking the opponent back to the hive, where it sees a chest burster explode from the inside of the opponent. This is a fatality on its own and is even cooler when it's done on multiple different characters. Characters like Reptile, Melina, and the Predator all get different types of baby xenomorphs that comes out of them because of how their head is differently shaped with their teeth and jaws and the type of stuff that a unique character makes them look different. The ending is exactly what you think it is, that the xenomorphs run rampant throughout the realms, and we get to see a couple cool variations like the ones based off of Goro and Ferrator. From this point on, the rest of the characters I feel are just not only more exciting picks than the alien and the others below the list, but their personality just shows off a lot more. Alien and Leatherface are brought to life very well in this game, but half of the fun is having guest characters in the games to see their personalities clash with those on the normal roster, and the world that they're thrown into. We don't get much of that with Leatherface because he can't talk, and we don't get any with the aliens because they're just animals at the end of the day. Still, I think Alien in this game is very cool. If it weren't for the fact that Predator is also in the game, which allows you to recreate Alien versus Predator, I think it'll be much lower on the list. And now for the verse of the day. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31 says, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength." Next up, we have Peacemaker from DC, played by John Cena, of course. His appearance in this game is spot on. Not only does the face model look exactly like John Cena, especially when you take the helmet off, but the rest of his costume looks fantastic. His gear is a little bit disappointing because none of his other helmets look all that interesting aside from one that I always prefer to use over the original, in fact. but his costumes are very bland. However, what saves the appearance and style of this character is the voice acting from John Cena and his interactions. Not only is John Cena's voice and personality perfectly hilarious in this game, but having not only a comedic relief guest fighter in the game, fun but also fits the universe still, is really cool. With the nature of how Mortal Kombat is, there's very few times where the series lightens up and takes itself anything less super serious. So, it's nice to have a funny character in this game. His moveset is also very cool. I have not seen the show, but what I do know about him is that he has tons of gadgets and different helmets that he can use. I really like how they incorporate all of his helmets into one thing here. He has multiple helmets that move him like a torpedo,
Torpedo. Torpedo.
the anti-gravity one,
It's a gravity. It's a gravity. It's a gravity.
the sonic boom, and
Sonic boom. Sonic boom.
they're all very fun to use and extremely unique for the character. Aside from that, he has his eagle eye pistol, his actual eagle named Eagly to act as a launching move to attack the opponent,
Eagly. Eagly.
and an anti-air blow dart. Speaking from a biased perspective for a moment, he's probably my favorite design character in this game from a gameplay perspective. He has tons of really cool combo routes, and they're actually super easy to do. This is even though he is widely considered to be one of, if not the worst character in the game from a competitive sense. I know you're thinking, man, why don't you put him in the top then? Simply because there are other characters that not only fit this world better, but are much more exciting names than Peacemaker. As for his finishers, the first one, named Pest Exterminator, shows one of the butterflies that controls minds from his TV show coming out of the opponent's mouth. Then he tries to shoot the butterfly several times with a shotgun, whereas he accidentally shoots the opponent instead. It's actually very funny because after he shoots the opponent in the arm, the leg, and through the stomach, the butterfly still lands on top of the gun, and he's like, "What? Didn't I shoot you already? Come on." And then squashes it with his hand. It's not only gruesome, but it's also funny. His second one, named Flight Delayed to Rest, shows him putting on a jetpack, which he did not use in any of the other gameplay, to grab the opponent and fly them across the stage, to then land on the ground and use a sonic boom to blow them up. The cherry on top of this fatality is that he feeds eagerly at the end. I think both of these are cool and represent the things that are in the show, but doesn't make much sense for gameplay purposes, so I'm glad they used it here. But I think they could have been a little more fun. I haven't seen the show, so I don't know how accurate it is, but I still think they're cool nonetheless. His animality, on the other hand, is hilarious. He also turns into an eagle and teams up with his pet to use guns, grenades, and other weapons to blow up the opponent. At the end of it, Peacemaker lands on top of the opponent's skull as Eagly flies in the background with a miniature American flag. It's crazy, over the top, and hilarious. In my opinion, it's the best animality in the game, only followed by Homelander, which we'll get to later. His ending is also pretty cool. And on brand for the character. It shows him getting into a fight with the little-known DC character named Eclipso. He's basically like Malekith from Marvel if he was actually funny. After a skirmish with him in the DC universe, he ends up in the Mortal Kombat universe. After this, he goes about the universe cleaning up the streets as he defeats the world's bad guy. Pretty standard, nothing crazy, but helped by the hilarious delivery of some lines by John Cena, of course, and the inclusion of Eclipso. As far as hype goes for this character, it was kind of odd. People loved that he was in the game as far as the character himself and the inclusion of John Cena, but people were a little bit burned already from the Joker, so having another DC character in the game so soon after was a little annoying. Although he's probably the character that fits the most in the world other than the Joker, so they at least went with a good pick, I also feel that he fits better in Mortal Kombat than Injustice, simply because after the success of the Sushi Squad and his TV show, John Cena is interlocked with this character, It's really hard to separate the two. I don't think that Injustice 3 would have the money to pay him to be a guest character or even a normal character in that game. So I'm glad that they put him in this one so that he could be voiced by John Cena. It also allows him to be far more distinct than any other character in those games. I think the most that people had problems with him was that it was representative more of a problem that for Mortal Kombat to go forward rather than the character himself. The prospect of more and more DC characters being guest characters in this game feels cheap and not all that interesting because Injustice exists and we'd rather just make another one of those games. In fact, the fears are pretty much true as most leaks and data miners suggest that Harley Quinn was going to be the final guest character.
Why are you the way that you are?
In 8th place, we have John Rambo. Starting off with his appearance, he looks fantastic. They went with the design from the first couple of Rambo movies, which looks great. It's weird though that they didn't give him a costume based on Last Blood, especially when they gave the Terminator his old man design as well. However, I am glad that the default option is normal Rambo. He has 4 costumes that he can use. The basic design with the army pants and a tank top. The same design but without a shirt on. One design that gives him made out of a tarp that he made in the forest in the first movie, and the army jacket he wore in the first movie. I don't mention the gear a lot, but it's worth noting that you can change the bandana on his head to red to match the one in the third movie as well. His intros and outros are all great as well. His intros include him appearing out of camouflage, tightening his bandana, inspecting his knife, and getting dropped into the battle from a helicopter. This one is easily the coolest. Then for the victory animation, we have the one where he's screaming after shooting a bunch of bullets that recalls the second movie. Another one shows him putting explosives on one of his arrows. And the third shows him being lifted out of the battle, similar to the ending of Rambo 2. The final one is a reference from the second movie being the mission accomplished. This is one of my favorites because the opponent will react to it.
Mission accomplished.
All of these are great references to the movies and really portray how he would act in these situations. It also helps a lot that the voice and likeness were both done by Sylvester Stallone himself. He plays them perfectly in this game, and it's like he never left. Now for his moveset. In my opinion, they nailed his design of his gameplay in here. He has tons of special moves that relate to things that he has done in the movies, like his bow and arrows, machine guns, snare trap, tree branch, landmines, and several command grabs. I think that his gameplay perfectly reflects how he fights in the movies. He can definitely hold his own against someone in a one-on-one fight, but his best fighting is done when he's in the shadows and hunting them. I think that out of every guest character in this game, he fits the gameplay of this Mortal Kombat more than any other game. Mortal Kombat 11 has a heavy focus on a strike-throw mentality where you get big pieces of damage here and there, but not really long combos, meaning that you have to be patient and wait for openings to do heavy damage in short bursts. That is how Rambo fights to a T. His finishers also reflect his fighting style as well. His first fatality, called Straight to Valhalla, shows him throwing his knife at the opponent before a tripwire catches them and shoves a bamboo spike through their back. He then sneaks up behind them and rips their throat out like he does to the Japanese man in Rambo, the remake, or Rambo 4, whichever you want to call it. His second fatality, called Perilla Thrilla, shows him wrapping a string of bullets around the opponent before kicking them into an electric bed trap that he was trapped in the movies. The bed then shocks the opponent, igniting the gunpowder inside of the bullets and severing the body and dropping their legs off. He then comes back and shoves his knife through their jaw and splits their face in half. Both of these are gruesome and shows how Rambo's best work has been when he can use the traps and stealth that the surrounding area gives him. His friendship is not only kind of funny but also odd. It shows him strapping some gear on and then getting thrown into a laser tag battle. Very cool and makes you wonder how seriously he would actually take a fight like this if he ever did fight in a laser tag battle.
Finish. Rambo wins. Flawless victory.
His ending is also very awesome. It shows him defeating Kronika and then attempting to use the hourglass to change the fate of multiple wars throughout history. He then realizes that he has become no better than the men that sent him into Vietnam in his first movie.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So he decides to set things back to the way they were and destroy the hourglass and let time work itself out. It's also worth mentioning that it's shown that he has a harder time beating the final boss, Kronika, more than the other guest characters. This makes sense because he's probably the weakest of the 5 in the game, but that may just be an oversight more than actual detail that you're supposed to take seriously. I think that the hype level of this character in this game is very odd and depends on the person. Most of the fun of having him in this game is more of the fact that you not only have Sylvester Stallone in the fighting game, but you also have him in the same game as Arnold. It's really cool to see two of the most iconic roles fight each other. And in my opinion, Rocky is probably more well-known of a role for Sylvester Stallone than Rambo, but I think that's mostly just because Rambo is a war movie and rated R rather than Rocky just being PG-13. But anyway, having him in this game was a dream come true, so all they had to do was stick the landing, and I think they did it well. The only thing that holds it back for me for being so high on the list is that his moveset, while very true to his fighting style, is still kind of basic. Also, it's kind of just a bunch of random things thrown together, and they don't really have a real game plan to him. I suppose it's more of a competitive problem rather than a problem with the character himself, but he really never actually falls under a good archetype of a fighter. The closest you could probably say is a brawler, but he has 2 command grabs between a special move and a normal move, and then most of the rest of his moves are all zoning moves, meaning projectiles. Very rare to see a character who is a zoner but also a grappler. It's a cool idea, but I don't think they executed it the best here, and if anything, I think a teleport would have helped with. He's often considered the worst in the game competitively, and like I said, I'm not going to take that into consideration here, but I will mention it here just because of how good or bad the character is in the instance of if it's based on how they were designed, rather than simple fighting game jargon that you would not understand, and most people don't care to think about, like frame data and things like that. His gameplay overall is just not that interesting. I'm aware it's just Rambo, he's not a superhero or anything like that, but I think they could have done something with him. In a game filled with sorcerers, ninjas, and robots, having a normal guy, even if it is Rambo, is just not interesting enough, and they need to do more to make his gameplay stand out. Next we have Homelander from The Boys. Homelander is a fascinating character because his moveset and design are almost entirely taken from the TV show. And while that is to be expected, and they did that quite well, if you know anything about the TV show, you know that there's very little actual fighting in the show. Contrary to what you may think, The Boys TV show does not actually have that high of a budget, and most of it's flown on celebrity actors like Carl Urban and others. So because of that, they had to stretch his moveset a little bit, but we'll get into it. First, we'll start with his appearance. I think that they nailed this design. The costume looks super cool, and the amount of detail that they put into the suit is incredible. The face model also looks very good. The man that plays him in the show, Anthony Starr, did the facial work for the character, but he did not voice him. However, I think the man that replaced him, who I believe is Chris Cox again, and I will double check that, did a fantastic job. He nailed every one of Homelander's inflections and little bits of ways he speaks perfectly. In every line, he adds just that little bit of spite that Homelander has to make him come across as a heroic jerk. Also, between the fantastic voice acting and personality, Homelander has some of the most hilarious lines in the game. Now onto the moveset. I've said before about other characters in the list that they fight exactly how you think they do. Characters like Conan, Leatherface, and especially RoboCop, I felt were held back by the fact they played exactly how you thought you would and nothing more. However, I think they did a fantastic job of taking the same mentality with Homelander and pushing it to its limits. He fights in the game again how you would think you would, with lots of lasers and the ability to fly. And while those two things are here, they implement them in a fantastic way. First, he has three different kinds of lasers that he can do. He can shoot them straight, he can shoot them at a low angle, and a high laser for anti-air. All of these are exactly what you think, and it's not much more. It is his main projectile, not only in the show, but also in the game, and it's very fun. Also, I don't mention sound a lot in this ranking, but I do have to mention the sound it makes is very cool. Before I get into the flying abilities that he has, he also has a few other special moves. He has a parry that is really cool, and a get off me tool that mimics the way he takes off in the show. You also have a stance move called the Diabolical Dash. This is a reference to the animated TV show. When he uses the dash, he can go into 4 different enders. 2 of them are simple knockdowns with a knee and a kick. The third is a grab that can be extended into combos with the main cameo that everyone uses, being Ferrator. And the third is your main move that you'll use a lot, which is an uppercut that launches the enemy into the air. The reason this is important is because of his ability to fly. By pressing the left trigger and up, he can fly pretty much everywhere, and it's really cool. In his flying stance, he can do a downward laser, the Vought drop, which is the reference to how he descends into the crowd and hits as a low. When he's in flight stance, he can do the Diabolical Dash in the air and use it to do whatever normally would be the uppercut. It turns into a downward punch like he followed up on for combos or cause a ground bounce. When you string these moves together, it creates combos where he is constantly taking the enemy into the air and back onto the ground. Between the way that his combos work and his normal fighting mechanics overall, it makes a character who you thought would be portrayed pretty boringly based on how he actually does in the show, and turns him into a character who's really fun, has an extremely high skill level to play well. Similar to Peacemaker, this mechanic makes him one of my favorite and most well-designed characters in the game. His normal attacks also have really cool references to them. His back 4 is a hand smack where he smacks your ears, and there's even an audio effect to it. It also greatly helps his overall enjoyment that he's in the same game as Omni-Man, because they're often compared to one another. They're both Superman-type characters that became popular around the same time thanks to Amazon TV shows. Next we have his fatalities, and his first one, named Winging It, shows him punching the opponent into the air where they could collide with the front of a jet airliner. It then peels them off the front of the plane to then let them go into the jet turbine, where they get shredded. He then salutes as the plane descends into some cloud. This is a reference to the TV show where it's portrayed him as an egotistical and only caring about himself type of person. It shows the lengths that he would go to protect his fame and would take out civilians so that they would not tell on him. That's what the show was getting at, not the game. The second fatality, named This Is Your Fault, shows him using his laser beams to cut off their legs, then slowly melt their head before it explodes, and then cutting them straight down the middle. This one is gruesome and shows off his ability to change the heat of his laser. Sometimes it can be very mild heat, or it can be extremely hot. In the fatality, you can see that it creates a small hole before eventually exploding the character's head. This animality is really cool because he turns into a griffin, then throws the opponent into the air before slicing them in half. After this, he grabs the top half of the body and explodes it with his lasers. I also love the detail that his wings show the American flag on his cape. Not only is this a really cool animality, but it also shows how ironic it is. Every other creature that the characters turn into in this game, with the exception of Omni-Man because he turns into a giant squid monster from his TV show, every other creature that they turn into is real. The point is that it shows that while the griffin is usually seen as a heroic creature, it still, at the end of the day, is a fake animal. It's made up for folklore. It mirrors how Homelander looks all shiny and fancy, but is really actually not a hero. His ending is cool, but nothing special. It shows him fighting off some Netherrealm demons in his own dimension before flying into the portal that they came out of and stumbling upon the tournament. He then enters the tournament so he can have fun showing off all the Mortal Kombat characters how strong he is. It's nothing crazy, but it's made so much better by, again, the fantastic voice acting done in the scene. Now for the hype level of this character. I think that most people will be very pleased with him. People were very curious to see how he would play differently to Omni-Man, and I think that as you'll see later, they nailed that perfectly. They fight nothing alike in this game, and people were very pleased with that. I do think that the hype in this game is definitely bolstered by the fact that Omni-Man is also here. I'm glad they were able to get them both in the game at the same time because I don't know if either of them have been nearly as much fun if they weren't together. I'm also glad that they included them when they were able to. I'm pretty sure that both these characters will become mainstays in culture for a long time, but they added them when they were both at the height of their popularity in the end of 2024 and June of 2025, respectively. I'm recording this in November of 2025, and as of now, they're still beloved characters, but by the time the next Mortal Kombat rolls around, they may not be as beloved as now. So I'm glad they were able to put them in the game when they're at the height of their popularity. Overall, he's a great character, but I think there are more characters on the list that the team nailed their fighting style and how popular they are overall just a little better. People love Homelander, but there are others on this list who I think fans were much more anxious to see in this fighting game franchise, and they were nailed even better than he was. Next, we have the killer of Woodsboro himself, Ghostface. His appearance is one of my favorites in this game. The classic robe and ghost mask both look fantastic in this game. The way that the cloak and longer pieces under his arms flow during gameplay is awesome. I also love all the different costumes and especially his gear. His costumes are all variations of his Ghostface suit that you can wear, including a more red design, a neon skeleton, and he even has a purple design that's reminiscent of Shang Tsung's design during the cutscene of Shaolin Monk. Where the design of this character really shines is in its mask. Between the movies and the costumes that you buy in real life, there have been so many different mask designs and they all look awesome. He had the normal design, an aged look from Scream 6, a metal look, a scarecrow mask, the devil design from the third movie, a more bloody design reminiscent of the toys that you can buy, a scorpion mask, a Baraka design that gives him scary teeth, a scrap design from the movies where it splits in half, and a cybernetic design reminiscent of the Terminator. All of these are awesome, and he can actually be paired up with different costumes fairly well. I could go into a fight and enjoy the design of almost any one of these costumes and masks and feel no different about them. The reason I say that is that this game, being Mortal Kombat 1, is very bad at giving guest characters different costumes and gear pieces to make them not only look distinct, but also make it worthwhile. If all that wasn't enough already, the man who voices the characters in the movies comes back to do it again. His delivery of some of the lines are not only awesome, but also chilling. Another bit of lore that they added that I love was that the killer underneath the mask is Billy from the first movie. You can't take his mask off when customizing the character, but you do when you use super moves or fatalities on them. All of their headgear comes off so you can see their face. So instead of having a blank expression from the mask that has been on him, they had the original actor come back and do some face modeling work for those reactions only. That's a level of detail that I love. Now we can get on to the gameplay. A lot of people were torn about whether or not they wanted Ghostface in Mortal Kombat because a lot of people, understandably, always just thought of him that he was just a dude with a knife and that was it. And while that's understandable, I think the team at NetherRealm understood the fan base and the concerns and took it to heart, because Ghostface is easily one of the coolest characters in this game. Spoilers for the Scream movies, but the gimmick of the character in those movies is that they can not only be anyone, but because you can literally go out and buy a Ghostface mask costume anywhere, even Walgreens, but that they are always 2, sometimes 3 Ghostfaces at a time. The gameplay in MK1 perfectly takes advantage of this at any given point. At any given point, you can not only call another Ghostface to help you, but you can switch them on the fly. Ghostface has a teleport called Backstage Pass, where you can run off the screen and appear on the other side. However, if you hold a specific button, you can either turn into a Black Dragon Assassin or Enforcer. They added the amazing detail that the other ghost faces are villains from the Mortal Kombat series that are not in this game. Those characters being Kira and Cobra, respectively. Each of them has not only their own unique attack strings, but also several other special moves. Cobra has the windmill kick and the Black Dragon Smash. Both of these are inspired by the fire karate moves that he has in the game. Kira has even more moves like the knife toss, which can also be done in the air, a Black Dragon Ball, Nightshade, which can be used as a restand to end combos with. The only downside of these powers is that it not only costs 1 bar of meter, but it also only lasts a limited time. That's probably the thing I don't like about this character the most, that being it's really hard to switch between them and use them effectively. If you get hit once, you go back to normal ghost face and you still take damage from that. I wish there was a way to set it as staying as one character for the entire match or something like that. But I understand for balancing reasons that they couldn't do it this way. However, even if you don't want to use those moves, the base moves for Ghostface are still incredibly deep. He has moves like a command grab, the backstage pass like I already mentioned, the ability to call on other Ghostface to attack the opponent from the back, and a stance where he runs at the opponent. This character has so much flow and ease to his moves that makes him a ton of fun to play around with. Now we move on to his finishers, and they're both pretty good. The first one shows him using 2 ghost faces to take out the opponent, and the second one shows him fighting Johnny Cage after he lost to him in the fighting game and breaks the 4th wall by taking him out after whining about he's just a dude with a knife. This animality shows him turning into what I guess to be a condor or some type of vulture before tackling the opponent and digging into their back with their beak and tearing the head out of the hole through the spine. Very brutal, but I don't think that the condor makes much sense for this character. I also have to mention the fatal blow, which is a super move in this game. It's really funny because it's not only the only time that you see all 3 ghost faces on the screen, but when you do it from full screen, one ghost face grabs the opponent from behind in a full Nelson while another runs up all the way across the screen and hits him in the face with a frying pan before the rest of the move takes place. Not only the fact that he hits you with a frying pan is so funny, but the fact that he has to run all the way across the screen is hilarious. Now we get to his ending, and I think this one is very on brand for the character. It's narrated by Ghostface himself, which is always a treat, and it's actually really funny because most of the time they will tell you how they got into the world, but this one immediately starts out by saying, "I don't know how I got here and I don't care." Proceeds to go on with the rest of his rant. It's a funny reminder that these are not supposed to be taken seriously and are just for fun. It then goes about his usual Ghostface type stuff, but he adds a twist of it as that he live streams the whole thing, which is funny. At the end, he says maybe someday it'll be turned into a video game, which I think is a reference to the game Dead by Daylight, which he also appears in. Overall, I think for how well they were able to adapt the Ghostface character into a fighting game was brilliant. They crafted his gameplay so well to where he is much more than just a dude with a knife and that's it. Between that, the fantastic way he looks in the game, and the voice delivery from the actor, I would love to put him right about here. From here on out, including Ghostface, all the characters I consider to be fantastic and could really go in any order for me. Next, we have Omni-Man from Invincible. His design is super cool in this game because it's actually the first time he's in something that is not 2D. The TV show and the comics are always 2D, so to see him in a 3D model, something really cool. I think they pulled it off very well. His base suit looks incredible, although I will say his earpieces are not that interesting. I do like, however, that they gave him one gear piece and color palette that, combined, will allow you to look more like Invincible, his son. Another one of his costumes is more reminiscent of the amount of white and gray colors that his race of alien space people, the Viltrumite, wear. Although it does not mimic the entire design of their costume, it merely changes the colors from red to white. It would have been nice to have a full different costume, but that's alright. The vocal performance, of course, is fantastic. He's voiced by J. Jonah Jameson himself, J.K. Simmons. NetherRealm has worked with a lot of different Superman characters in their games, but I think this is easily the best designed one that they have made. In the comics and the show, Omni-Man's whole thing is brute force. His only powers are flight and super strength and vulnerability. However, both of these stats are maxed out as far as power scaling goes, if that makes any sense. He's easily one of the strongest characters in all of fiction. While he's probably still bested by Superman on a good day, you would absolutely give him a run for his money. I think that the team perfectly implemented his fighting style into this game. He has tons of moves like the Invincible Rush and the hand clap that perfectly portray his brute nature. However, what truly sets him apart from the other Superman that they've worked on before is the Viltrumite stance. In this stance, you can go into 4 different moves. One is a simple dashing attack where he hits the opponent across several times before he breaks their back like he does to Donald before the house blows up. One where he flies into the air and slams back down on the opponent. And another where he does a simple uppercut. However, with the final of these enders, it is the most important. By doing a Viltrumite stance and going into his grab, which is the X button if you're on Xbox, you can launch the opponent into the air to then follow up with major combos. Really cool because you can activate this grab at nearly any point in any combo, or even when the opponent is just jumping at you or something. It's tons of fun to read the opponent activate the grab just at the right time to follow up on combos. I love both Omni-Man and Homelander in Mortal Kombat 1 because of the unique gameplay of this game. They added air combos, which was a staple back in the 3D Mortal Kombat era of the PlayStation 2, which this game takes heavy inspiration from. Almost every character in the game has a specific combo or special move that can launch the opponent into the air. After doing this, you can follow up for massive combos. The only reason I'm pointing this out specific gameplay mechanic when talking about Omni-Man and Homelander is that both of them are superheroes that can fly. So taking the idea of characters that can fly and putting them into a game where air combos is relevant was a fantastic idea. Aside from Rambo and Mortal Kombat 11, I think that the two of them fit the gameplay of this Mortal Kombat more than any other guest character. I'm bringing this up during the Omni-Man segment because something that is emphasized a lot in Omni-Man's comics and TV show is his insane speed. He fights a lot of characters in the air like his fellow Viltrumites, so it's cool to see that the speed element was implemented into this character. When he goes into the Viltrumite stance, he can also press the right bumper or something like that, depending on what you're playing on, to switch to the other side of the screen, which also shows his speed. Now we can talk about his finishers. They are both really cool, with one of them being a reference to how he kills Red Rush in the first episode of the show, and he also has a brutality that harkens back to that fight as well, and his other fatality references the train scene when he fights Mark. His animality, named Hail Mary, shows him transforming into a giant squid monster that he fights in the show and eating the opponent. As I said during the Homelander segment, he is the only other character in the game whose animality includes him turning into a character that's not a real animal. Not only does this creature have an awesome design, but it's also an amazing reference. The ending is also pretty cool. It shows him conquering several timelines throughout the Mortal Kombat multiverse and tries to buy his son Mark time to prepare for the Viltrumite Empire to return to his homeworld and attack it. There's nothing notable here because it's a pretty standard ending, although I will say that it's really cool that they include the character Conquest in the ending, as you can see in the background. It's cool because as of the release of this character in November of 2023, the character had not appeared in the show, and in fact, his only appearance in the show at this point was in March of 25. So it's cool that they looked into the comics enough to know that he was part of his story and implement him into the game somehow. As for the hype and love for this character in the game, I think he's a slam dunk. I understand that some people find him not that enthralling because he's simply a Superman that flies and punches. However, not only do I think that they implemented that gameplay style perfectly and in a really cool way, I also think that it's more of the show's fault because at the time, he's only in one season of the show and then does nothing for a whole season and then has a little bit to do in the third. So he doesn't have a ton of iconic moves to pull from just yet. His inclusion is greatly helped by the addition of Homelander in this game because, as I said before, they're often compared. I really don't have much else to say, and I just think that the other characters on this list are even more incredible. In fourth place, we have the T-1000 from Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I bet that some people are actually surprised to see this character as high as he is, because a lot of people are not excited for this guy. I've not heard anyone who doesn't like the character so far. I just don't think that people ever thought of him as a Mortal Kombat character. Honestly, I think out of every character in this game, he's probably the least violent character they added as far as the actual movie's perspective. The T-1000, at least the one that they included from Terminator 2, really only has 2 kills in the entire movie. Both of those kills are iconic, no doubt, but it's odd that they thought that would qualify him for this game. However, once people got their hands on the character, their minds were quickly changed. Let's start with the presentation and style. For starters, the actor who played him in the movie, Robert Patrick, returned to reprise his role, and it's actually amazing how well he did. Not to say he's a bad actor or anything, it purely comes down to the fact that you can definitely tell that his voice has changed over time. In fact, it's been 30 years, but I think his more deep, raspy voice actually fits the character better now than it did when the movie came out. That's not to say that he sounded bad in the movie or anything. I just think that when you hear this character as a killer robot that can turn into liquid metal, the voice that is in the game sounds more like what you would initially think of than the actual original movie.
Forest.
If we're the same unit, something has gone very wrong.
The idea in the movie was supposed to be that he would blend in with other people, so I guess that's fair. As far as the original design goes, I think it looks perfect. Every bit of his cop suit looks perfect, and they even changed the badge to where it says Earthrealm Police. I love the attention to detail on the suit. While I definitely prefer the original costume for him, I will admit some of his others are at least very funny. He has one that matches the way he looked on the motorcycle with the helmet and sunglasses, which is cool. He also has one that looks like a crossing guard, a Mad Max variant, and even a British police officer. Some of the other ones include a more futuristic look, and one that makes him look like the Mortal Kombat character Stryker, and one that looks like he came out of COVID. Like I said, none of these are amazing, but for only ever being in one movie, I think they did what they could. Also, Terminator Genesis does not count. He was only in that movie for like 10 minutes, and it wasn't even the same guy playing him. He also did nothing cool in the movie either. Undoubtedly, though, where the character shines the most is his gameplay. I've never seen a character so visually striking as this character, at least as far as one that is as far as one goes that isn't an extremely stylized game like Guilty Gear or something. Every character in that game is super expressive because of the way that the characters are drawn. With this one being a more standardized fighting game, having a character who's extremely visually interesting stands out more. Starting with his basic special moves, he has the straight pistol, the walking pistol shot, which yes, he does still keep his eyes open. the hook slam, the ground spike that looks like tire poppers, and the acute angle hooks. This is your more average combo ender or armor breaker. Where he really gets interesting is his final two special moves. The first is the puddle. When he goes into the puddle, he can do a puddle punch similar to the character Glacius from Killer Instinct. From this state, he can do the puddle punch or a ground spike. After doing the puddle punch, he can launch the opponent into the air for air combos. His final special move is really cool. This is the amorphous step. From this state, he turns into full metal and can take several hits of armor for breaking. From this state, he can do a simple knockdown or a grab that can be followed up with combos with certain cameos. It's not necessarily a blight on the design of the character himself, but it is worth noting that this move was heavily nerfed over time. He now only takes 1 or 2 damage in this state instead of several hits of damage. It makes him feel a little bit less oppressive, which is a shame, but he's still really cool. I love the design for this character because he is so expressive at some of the flashiest combos in the game, especially for a character who is not expressive at all, being a robot. This character is truly a technical marvel of 3D modeling because of how often not only parts of his body change into full metal and different weapons, but his entire body changes into metal. They really nailed the detail on this character. You can even see when he is attacked that there are many droplets that fly off him and they come right back to him to simulate blood. To be clear, he has no actual regenerative properties in the sense of regaining health, but it's a cool detail either way. Now we can talk about his finishes. The first one shows him driving the giant pickup truck onto the screen and ramming the opponent with it. They then become attached to the hood of the vehicle, where he breaks the window, climbs onto the hood of the car that's still driving, and then shoots you with a machine gun several times before the vehicle crashes into the other side of the stage. He then walks out of the explosion like nothing happened, reminiscent of how he does in the movie. I love this fatality. It's not always super creative, but it feels like an action scene. His second fatality, called To Oppose and Harm, shows him transforming into the opponent before combining the two most iconic kills that he has in the movie. He turns into the opponent, then turns his pointer finger into a knife to stab them through the head, then turns back into himself, shoves a giant hand through their hand and their mouth, similar to how he killed the father, before then splitting them in half and ripping them apart with the hooks he opened the elevator with in the movie. It's not only a technical marvel of a fatality, it's also so creative. His animality, called Wolfie's Just Fine, shows him turning into a canine attack dog and tear the opponent's head off before chewing on it like a bone. It's a cool reference to how he uses his voice to trick characters over the phone, but I would say it's one of the weaker ones. I've heard several people say this before, and I agree with them. I wish that he would have turned into the T-1 million, which is a giant spider thing from what I believe to be the comic. I wish he would have turned into one of the giant mechs from the Terminator Salvation movie. I'll admit that's not a good movie, but it would at least be a cool reference to other Terminator material. Speaking of a cool Terminator reference, if you do a mirror match between characters, one of the dialogues say that the mission is to protect John Connor against the other one. This is actually very cool because in the movie, he's sent to kill John Connor before he can become the leader of the robot resistance. It's a bunch of time travel shenanigans that don't really matter, but it's a nice detail to explain why two T-1000s are fighting each other. Now for this ending, and I think it's actually pretty cool. It shows him shapeshifting into another Mortal Kombat character to infiltrate their ranks before taking them out one by one. He does some conquering before coming across Sector's lab. Sector Mortal Kombat 1 is a person who creates cyborgs, and taking her out, he then takes control of her robot factory and creates thousands of other T-1000s to take over the rest of the universe. It's really cool that they too drew parallels between how similar their missions are, and in fact that T-1000, no matter how evil the character is, would never work with another villain. I think the hate for this character being originally announced, while fair, was extremely overblown. When he was released, he easily became one of people's favorites to ever enter this game, and definitely one of the best guest fighters that the Mortal Kombat series has ever seen. We are now entering the final three, and there's no doubt that any of these could have gone in any order for me. As I talk about later, the number one on this list is definitely set in stone for just how much I love the character himself and how well he was done, but the other two are still fantastic in their own ways. In third place, we have Spawn. If you don't know, this is a comic book character superhero. He was originally a US soldier who died in battle before being resurrected with devil-like abilities. However, similar to characters like Ghost Rider or Hellboy, he is a hero. He has tons of powers, including things like the cape that acts like tentacles, energy blasts, and guns. Lots of guns. First, we'll look at the visual appearance. I think that he was done perfectly in this game as far as a visual standpoint. Spawn on his own already looks like an incredibly designed character, so for them to mess them up, you'd have to do something really spectacular. But I think he fits perfectly into this game. His base look already is amazing, but he also has one look that covers him in armor and gun shells, one that looks more like a classic spandex look, and an original design for this game that looks more like a medieval knight. It's a shame they didn't actually use the design from the medieval knight version of Spawn, but that probably would not have worked well with the gear system. It's a little disappointing, but I do understand. Aside from that though, every one of these costumes looks perfect. His intros and outros are also amazing. The first shows him jumping off a stone cross in a cemetery with red lightning behind him, reminiscent of the opening of his TV show. Another one shows him walking into battle with the head of the evil clown named the Violator from his comic. The third shows him covered up by his cape as it flows about the stage. And the final one shows him walking in with glowing green plasma on his hand. All of these are astonishing. His outros are equally amazing. The first shows him being summoned by the demon that gave him his powers, Malgosha. The second shows him flipping his cape around to then teleport onto a giant throne. The third shows him jumping into the air and doing a pose in the air as he sends his chains onto the ground. And the final one shows him ripping what I guess is his costume off to show his true face. His moveset, however, is where he really shines. He has tons of moves that reflect his extremely large pool of moves and abilities that he can use. He has moves like the Necro Blast, Gunfire, and lots of abilities around his cape. However, while all of these are super cool, he has two moves that really make him a blast to play in this game. The first is the Charging Hellspawn. With this move, he grows spikes from his shoulders, runs into you, launches you across the screen, then launches you back at himself using an axe and fire sword that fly out of the ground to then be used to follow up on combos. This is a super cool move that does tons of damage and can set up for awesome combos. However, what's even cooler is that he also has a move named Soul Forfeit. When he does this ability, you can create crushing blows without needing to go through the requirements of it first. In this game, there's a special mechanic called Crushing Blows, where if you do a specific set of moves at the right time, you can activate them to do tons of damage and sometimes even pop up the opponent. I actually really like this mechanic and it can be fun to use massive combos of damage. Although it can be annoying sometimes to jump through several hoops to be able to make them activate. However, with this move, the need to activate them in certain ways is completely removed. So instead of locking the opponent into the corner to create a crushing blow from the throw move, you can just do this move anywhere on screen and it immediately activates it. Not only is this idea awesome on its own, but it becomes even more cool when you realize you can string these moves together. A lot of people don't like the crushing blow mechanic in this game because of how much you have to work to activate them, and of how much stuff you have to keep track of. So having a character that completely nullifies the need to work hard and carefully plan out the activation of these moves is great. I don't really know if it necessarily reflects the character himself very well. Like, he easily looks the flashes and his normal combos, so adding this ability on top of it makes them even cooler. Now we can move on to his finishers, and in my opinion, this is the weakest part about him. Spawn is not really in anything to where it shows him having super iconic moments that would be good to pull for this portion of his moveset. So it's understandable. I think they could have done a little better, like calling in other characters from his franchise or something like that. His friendship shows him turning his cape into a hammock and then reading a teen drama novel.
Friendship. Spawn wins. Flawless victory.
I love the clever use of the cape, and I think that it was a funny interaction. Now we can get to his ending, where it shows him sending Kronika to the same dimension as Malgosha. He then teams up with Sub-Zero and Scorpion to take down a ton of other demons and monsters. It's a cool idea, and I totally could see Sub-Zero and Scorpion teaming up to help him out. Sub-Zero and Scorpion are not typically the nicest guys, but not only are they more heroic in this game than any other in the franchise, but any chance they get to beat some monsters that put them down the path that they were on, they will always take that chance. Overall, I think that Spawn was perfectly implemented into this game, and he's one of, if not the most requested guest character for Mortal Kombat, other than possibly Michael Myers. So seeing him not only realize in this game, but realize to the perfection that it was, is awesome. In second place, we have the Predator. The variation system in Mortal Kombat X allowed these characters to be so much more in depth and true to the source material than other characters. The Predator is extremely awesome in this game. He has tons of super cool moves that harken back to his movies. They even include some things from the comics. For his general design overall, he looks fantastic. He has 3 different variations other than the standard one. The first is Warrior, where it takes off the mask to show his true face. Hunter, which gives him the mask and some extra armor on his arms. And Hishkyutin, which gives him the mask and the plasma rifle on his shoulder. The name Hishkyutin comes from the comics. Similar to the Xenomorph, the Predators have crossed over with tons of different comic book franchises, including Marvel and DC, so it's cool that they are referencing them here. I also love all the sound effects they give the character, from roars and screams he does at the opponent, to the menacing laugh that he shouts at the end of every round that he wins. It gives off not only beastly vibes of the Predator, but also how much he enjoys hunting. As far as the moveset goes, we'll start with the variation list moves. Those include the stealth mode, which is a cool effect but doesn't actually give you invisibility. It reduces chip damage and completely nullifies it when using a meter burn. Chip damage is basically any damage that is done to you while you are blocking, so having the ability to remove that is cool. Next we have the Smart Disc. This is an attack that will track the enemy and hit them anywhere on screen. It adds a ton of pressure on the characters and even keeps the opponent stuck in the air during long combos. The final move is the Blade Stab. When meter burn, it launches the opponent into the air and is your main combo tool. Now getting on to specific variation moves, we'll start with Warrior. Warrior gives him the Yayucha Strike, which is an overhead slam, the meter burn to hit the opponent into the air. Then we have the Dread Launch, which is a similar get off me tool. And finally we have the Self Detonate. In this move, it allows you to pop up the opponent into the air after a couple seconds and does a tiny bit of damage to yourself as well. It's also cool because it will activate when you grab the opponent, which is very rare. The next variation is the Hunter variation. This one once again gives him the mask and allows him to do specific moves. This one gives him the med kit, which allows him to heal back 10 health if meter burned. It also gives him the ground snag, which is cool for setup. This one is definitely the simplest, but they had to give him 3, so they just took whatever if they hadn't used it and put it on him. Then we have Hishkutin, and this one gives him the plasma shot. This is much more of a zoner archetype of fighter with this variation, and allows him to shoot the plasma cannon straight, down, or up. While you would think that this would easily be the simplest of the versions, the plasma cannon actually adds a lot of different scenarios and setups that you can create. Overall, these variations add perfectly to encapsulate just how many weapons and attributes that the fighter has at his disposal. He's so much fun and easily one of the coolest characters that I have created. Now we'll get on to the fatalities. The first one, named Ghosting Us, shows him impale the opponent on his blade before shoving a smart disc in their head. He then drops their body onto the ground, where the smart disc rolls away to show their brain that's been exposed. It's a simple fatality, but it's very creative, and the cinematography of it, showing the slow build-up, is very cool. It's actually a luxury to have in this game because while a lot of finishing moves are very cool, oftentimes they just end at a weird spot. The one thing I will say about it is that certain characters like the Xenomorph don't really work very well with this fatality because of the weird shape of their head, but that's more of a problem on the other characters than the Predator himself. The second one, called Certain Death, shows him using his plasma cannon and a heat sense to dismember the opponent. He first shoots their arm, then their stomach, then their head using iconic triangle aiming systems the whole time. It's very well paced and has a really good ending. Both of these fatalities are great, but I do wish they would have used his spaceship maybe once. He obviously couldn't integrate that type of thing into his normal moveset, so it would have been nice to do that here. Although it is used in his endings animation when he wins a match. As far as his ending goes, it's easily one of the best. It shows him defeating a couple outworld sorcerers before getting his hands on the amulet that gives the character Ermac his powers. Then with the abilities of magic and his technology combined, he becomes basically unstoppable. It's a really cool idea and something I wish the movies themselves would do. It really shows their thirst for the hunt and shows how they will do anything for a power upgrade. I think he's easily one of the best characters that NetherRealm has ever built, not only in guest characters, but in characters overall. They got everything down with this character, from the look, the sounds, the incredibly deep and memorable moveset, to just the fun factor of him. He's also greatly helped by the fact that the alien is in the game. There are tons of other iconic team-ups or matchups across Mortal Kombat, but I actually think this one is the best. I think that's mainly because it has happened before. For some people, that may dampen the experience knowing that this already exists, but for one, some of those Aliens vs. Predator movies are usually considered not very good, or there at least has not been one that's really good since good CGI was available, and being able to pick which side you prefer is even cooler. Finally, in first place, we have Jason Voorhees. Now, if I'm being completely honest, and this was an unbiased list, I don't think he would be number 1. I think he'd go in third place just below Predator and Spawn. But I am being biased, so I'm going to pick him as first because I like the character and it's my video, so cry hard. After the inclusion of Freddy Krueger in Mortal Kombat 9 opened the door for other horror guest characters to join the battle, everyone was clamoring for Jason next by far. His look in this game is incredible. It perfectly portrays how much of a brute he is and just the raw strength in his gameplay. He has 3 variations and they're all spectacular. Visually, they changed them a decent amount, but not too much. The first one, named Slasher, gives him his iconic machete. The second, Relentless, changes his mask from white to black. And finally, the Unstoppable puts a chain around his neck. As far as the moveset goes, it's also perfect. His tons of grabs and armor in his normal attacks, his variationless moves are awesome. The first is the choke, the second is the backbreaker, which is unblockable, the bear hug, which is also unblockable, and Killing Machine, which gives him infinite armor for the next 10 seconds or so. He's very vulnerable after a couple of seconds when this runs out, and he cannot jump, but it's still awesome. He also has this charge move that can be armored. All these base moves make for an extremely aggressive fighter who is really hard to deal with. Before we get into the variations, the only thing he really doesn't have is a projectile. But that is where the variations come in. The first of these is Slasher. His charging punch before is turned into a shoulder bash, but they're effectively the same thing. The choke is replaced with a move where he grabs the opponent and hacks at them twice with a machete. And the tight squeeze from backbreaker and bug bear hug are removed. But he's given two brand new moves in this variation as well. The machete toss, which gives him a projectile, and the psycho slash, where he does a series of slashes at the opponent that's mostly used for combo enders. He does still retain his armor move though. The next variation, named Relentless, gives him a move called Pursuit, where it mixes up the other player's controls. It's meant to make it feel like you're being hunted by a villain. And the Lake Mist, which is a teleport. This is the one that is closest to the normal moveset and really just makes what's already a stacked moveset even better. The teleport gives them an easy way to get in on the opponent when they're trying to zone him out. And the button switching mechanic makes it even harder to fight an already difficult character to fight against. It really sells the idea you're fighting an impossible opponent. The final variation, named Unstoppable, is probably the coolest. It's again pretty similar to the base version, but has two really cool moves here. You once again lose the armor, but get two replacements for it. You get the health regeneration and damage increase. What's even cooler about these two moves is that they can be stacked, which means they can be used at the same time. The damage boost is especially awesome because it allows an average combo to do 10% more damage than it otherwise would have, which is an insane amount. It even allows your unblockable special moves like the bear hug or backbreaker to do around 30% each without even implementing it into a combo. What really sets this variation apart from the others is if he loses a round, he's shocked back to life to keep on fighting. It's not perfect or anything. It takes any of your super bar that you have left, and you have no choice on whether or not you use it at the end of a round. So if your opponent has a lot more health, there could be times you would have rather saved it for your next round. But it's super cool ability, and it's actually a lot better than the Terminator's way of doing it, because you can use it after any round, and you still have access to your entire moveset. Every one of his variations is not only super unique and awesome, it is a perfect reflection of how unstoppable and strong Jason is. Now we can move on to his fatalities. The first, named Kill for Mother, shows him taking out his machete and slicing the opponent in half diagonally through 3 precise cuts while his iconic sound effects flare in the background. The second, named Sleeping Bag Killer, shows him driving the opponent and slamming them on the ground several times before all their limbs fall off. This is a very cool fatality, but I wish I didn't name it what they did. The Sleeping Bag Kill is one of his most famous in all of his movies, and while it's still great that they referenced it, he doesn't actually use a sleeping bag. If they named this something other than that, it would easily be a 10 out of 10 fatality, but I have to leave it about a 9 out of 10. Anyways, both of these are great, showing off his sheer brute nature and how truly unstoppable he is. Now we get onto his ending, and I would say this one is kind of weak. All that really happens is that he defeats Shinnok, and in exchange, Liu Kang offers him a position with him on the side of his army of goodness. But what ends up happening is that Jason refuses and goes on doing his normal thing throughout the realm. It's very on point for his character, so I can't complain too much, but I would have liked to have seen him do something similar to what Joker did in Mortal Kombat 11's ending, where he teamed up with a morally gray character to seek vengeance against some worse people. Maybe he could have teamed up with Sub-Zero and Scorpion to defeat Shao Kahn in another world or something like that, but either way, it's still cool as it is. One thing I will say is that he definitely would have been undisputed #1, no matter what my biases would say, if Leatherface was not the other guest forward character in this game. As I said before, it was originally meant to be Michael Myers. The two of them are much more often compared as big brutes who take down people with sharp objects, so it's understandable that having them both in the same game would be awesome. But anyways, Jason in this game is still awesome. And as I said before, I'm glad they added Leatherface to this game because if he fits not only the overall style and look with the game, but the gameplay as well. So having him team up in this game with Jason is fine in my book. The only other criticism I can give to the character is that I wish they would have included some kind of skin or reference to Jason X or Uber Jason or whatever you want to call him. I understand why they didn't do it because not only would his gameplay in that sense be extremely different with tons of cybernetic abilities and just being a heavy character overall, not even taking into consideration that his model would have been changed drastically, but it still would have been nice. If Jason ever returns, I would hope that they would use this version because he's exactly how I would want him to be in a normal setting. So having an entire moveset based around Jason X could be cool. Although, as I said before, I don't think it's objective standpoint he'd be #1. He'd probably be close to a third, but he's still my favorite. I also think he would have been my favorite outright if I was around to play this game when it was first announced and played and all that, because this was released back in 2012, and at the time I was 6 years old, so obviously I couldn't play online or learn all the combos and all that stuff. I love a lot of the MK1 and to a lesser extent Mortal Kombat 11 characters a lot because I can play them online still to this day because those games still have a decent online presence. Mortal Kombat X, while you can still find matches no problem, it's not only much harder and quicker game than the other two, but almost everyone who still plays it to an extreme amount and is really good at it. So I don't really get much luck playing online with those because everyone is super really good at the game. So that's my list. What do you all think? Are my opinions based or do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below and I'll see you all next time.